More than 15 million people in the UK have been given their first COVID-19 vaccine just over 2 months since the programme started. In England, the top 4 priority groups have now been offered the vaccine. The Prime Minister said overall it was an extraordinary feat.
I want to thank each and every person who has helped make it happen. You can be incredibly proud of the part you've played.
We'll be looking at which groups are next in line for the vaccine. Also tonight, Harry and Meghan announced they're overjoyed to be expecting their second child. To Navalny with love, supporters of the jailed Russian opposition leader protest with flowers on Valentine's Day. And Captain Root is swept aside as India take complete control of the second test against England. Good evening. The UK has hit a major milestone with more than 15 million people given their first dose of the coronavirus vaccine. In England, everyone in the top 4 priority groups has now been offered a first jab. That's a day ahead of the scheduled target. The Prime Minister praised a truly nationwide effort and said that everybody who'd contributed, from NHS staff to volunteers, should be incredibly proud. The success of the vaccination programme has led to a growing pressure for a clearer roadmap out of lockdown and a return to some kind of normality, including from some of Mr Johnson's own MPs. Here's our political correspondent, Jonathan Blake.
Lining up in Lancashire for the coronavirus vaccine, some of those getting their first jab today and taking the total number to be offered an injection to 15 million across the UK.
This country has achieved an extraordinary feat.
In a video posted online, the Prime Minister confirmed the government had met its target of offering the 4 most vulnerable groups in England their first jab by mid-February.
It has been a truly national, UK-wide effort. We've done it together. And I want to thank each and every person who has helped make it happen. You can be incredibly proud of the part you've played.
With vaccinations in full flow, the Prime Minister's promised a roadmap out of lockdown in England a week tomorrow, the 22nd of February. The government wants schools to open to all pupils on the 8th of March. Next, more outdoor recreation is likely to be allowed, followed by more shops being able to open, and finally, hospitality venues.
Hi, my name's Libby. I'll do your vaccination today.
But with the aim now to offer everyone over 50 their first jab by the end of April, some argue all legal restrictions should end by then.
It's completely tied to the rollout of the vaccination programme and the fact that you're then protecting the most vulnerable people from death and serious disease from COVID from the fantastically successful vaccination programme the NHS is undertaking.
And in the industries worst affected, there's an urgency to start trading soon.
We think we can open very safely for Easter weekend. We understand, as I said, that there would be social restrictions in place like there were in July, and we will absolutely administer those to the letter. And we will ensure that we've got a responsibility for our customers and our staff.
Some Conservative MPs are growing increasingly frustrated and want firm commitments from the Prime Minister about when restrictions will be lifted. But although Boris Johnson can't ignore the political pressure from his own party, the risks of opening things up too soon seem to be weighing more heavily. And for now, the watchword in government is caution until the impact of the vaccines becomes clear. Political opponents will be the first to accuse Boris Johnson of easing restrictions before coronavirus is contained.
This lockdown has to be the final lockdown, by the way. The strategic aim is to do everything we can now so we don't have to go back into a lockdown.
While seizing on the success of the vaccination programme so far, the Prime Minister acknowledged there was much more work to do. The return to normal is still some way off. Jonathan Blake, BBC News.
So, having reached the first major vaccination target, how does the rollout proceed from here, and who's next in line for the jab? Our science correspondent Rebecca Morell reports.
From Margaret Keenan in December, the first person to be vaccinated, to less than 10 weeks later, 15 million people have had their first dose. So who will be vaccinated next and when? The next stage starts with 65 to 69-year-olds. That's nearly 3 million people. And those with underlying health conditions, an estimated 7 million. Next up, it's 2 million 60 to 64-year-olds, then the 5 million 50 to 59-year-olds. That's a total of more than 17 million people who'll be offered vaccines by the end of April. Then for phase 2, another 21 million people. The rest of the adult population should be vaccinated by the autumn. More than 1 million over 65s have already been sent letters this weekend, and some areas have even started delivering jabs.
It's an indication of the different demographics of different parts of the country. Obviously, certain populations will have much higher proportions of those people who are over 70 or who are housebound, and that will take longer. In my practice in North London, we are vaccinating already those people over 60 and 65.
People with some medical conditions are also being invited. These include chronic lung disease, Down syndrome, diabetes, some cancers and morbid obesity. So how will we know if vaccination is working? The best place to look is Israel, which has inoculated more of its population than anywhere else in the world. And hospitalisations of those who were vaccinated first, the over 60s, are falling much faster than other groups. So when could we see an impact in the UK?
In about a week's time, we may well see the beginnings of an effect in hospitalisations, particularly in older people, relative to changes in younger people. It'll be cases, it's going to be a little bit less clear, I think, because vaccine doesn't necessarily stop mild cases.
In the coming weeks, could there be any problems? There will be some bumps in supply with Pfizer overhauling its factory in Belgium. New variants could also pose a problem, and booster shots might be needed to improve immunity. COVID levels in the UK are still high, but vaccination should soon make a difference, helping us map a path out of lockdown. Rebecca Morell, BBC News.
Let's have a look at the latest government figures now. And there were nearly 11,000 new infections recorded in the latest 24-hour period. That's the lowest since October. An average of 13,200 new cases were recorded per day in the last week. 23,341 people are in hospital with coronavirus across the UK. In the last 24 hours, 258 deaths have been recorded. That's people who died within 28 days of a positive COVID test. 672 deaths were announced on average every day in the past week. And the total number of people who've died is just over 117,000. As we've heard, the government has reached a significant milestone in its vaccination programme. Over 500,000 people had a first dose of one of the 3 approved COVID-19 vaccines in the latest 24-hour period, which takes the number of people who've now had their first jab to more than 15 million. Well, from tomorrow, travellers arriving in England from a list of 33 high-risk COVID-19 countries will have to quarantine in a government-approved hotel for 10 days. It'll cost them over £1,700, and people who break the rules risk fines of up to £10,000. Let's go now to our correspondent Katie Austin, who's outside the Department of Health for us. And Katie, are the travel industry and immigration staff ready for this?
Well, the union, which represents immigration staff, says there's still a lack of clarity around some details when it comes to implementing the policy at the border. Heathrow Airport, which is expected to handle most passengers arriving from affected countries, says it's concerned about whether the border force will cope. The worry there is about queues building up and even incoming flights having to be delayed. The Home Office told us this evening that it's maintained staffing levels at Heathrow throughout the pandemic, and people should only be travelling when it's really strictly necessary. The government's thinking behind introducing this hotel quarantine policy is an extra layer of security, if you like, against new variants of coronavirus. It's secured 10 hotels for the purpose, although that number could expand. And while people are staying there, they'll have to take 2 COVID tests during that 10-day period.
Katie, thank you. And I'm joined now by our health editor, Hugh Pym. Hugh, it's a big day, but there is still some light and shade.
Yes, Rita, it is a huge achievement by the NHS. Remember that the Oxford-AstraZeneca vaccine was only given regulatory approval at the end of December. Then the rollout of that one started on January the 4th. The Prime Minister only set the target then. Then there was the whole issue of changing the second dose from 3 weeks to 12 weeks. That was yet more logistical challenges. And then on top of all that, the huge pressure on hospitals throughout January, and still there with COVID patient numbers. All of that the NHS in different parts of the UK had to cope with some support from the military as well. There are still some question marks. We don't know what percentage of NHS and care home staff have had the vaccines. Certainly in England, although Scotland and Wales have provided some figures, they of course were in the top 4 groups. So the rollout for the next 5, as we've been hearing, begins from this coming week with the 65s and over, and then the clinically vulnerable. But again, more detail is being looked for in that group of people with underlying health conditions, who exactly will qualify. And for example, with those with asthma, there has been a slightly tighter definition put out about who qualifies, people with severe asthma and others feeling that actually they would like more clarity on who's going to qualify.
Thank you, Hugh. Hugh Pym there. A woman who accused Scotland's former First Minister Alex Salmond of sexual assault has said it's become much harder for women to make complaints in the aftermath of his acquittal in a criminal trial last year. The woman, who can't be named for legal reasons, has told the BBC that an ongoing inquiry by members of the Scottish Parliament has become so political she's finding it more traumatic than the trial. Here's our Scotland political editor, Glenn Campbell.
When Alex Salmond was cleared of all charges, he hinted at a political plot against him.
That information, that facts and that evidence will see the light of day.
As he's pursued claims of a conspiracy, those who testified against him feel they're being implicated, prompting one of the women to speak out. Her voice and appearance have been changed to protect her identity.
It is utterly absurd to suggest that 9 women could be persuaded to lie to the police, to perjure themselves in court.
Mr. Salmond was acquitted of 13 sexual assault charges. By then, he'd won a separate case against the Scottish Government, challenging the process it used to investigate earlier harassment complaints against him. A Holyrood committee is investigating the mistakes the Scottish Government made. The woman I've spoken to thinks it has become too political.
It's actually, in many ways, more traumatic than the experience of the High Court trial.
More traumatic?
I think so, because you actually now have what was a glimmer of hope in a committee thinking that they could be impartial. Instead, what has happened is they have taken your very personal experiences and they have exploited them for their own self-serving political interests.
It was obviously a big decision for you to make a complaint. Do you think that women are more or less likely to do that now than they were before all of this?
Much less likely. I think that this has made it much harder for women to be believed and for women to be able to come forward.
The committee conveners offered a personal apology for any hurt the inquiry's caused and the hope that it'll lead to better protection for women.
What started with complaints about Alex Salmond is now heavily focused on how his successor as First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, and her administration mishandled those original complaints. The inquiry expects to call both politicians to give evidence in the next few weeks before Holyrood breaks for the election. Glenn Campbell, BBC News.
The Duke and Duchess of Sussex have announced tonight that they're expecting their second child. I'm joined now by our royal correspondent Nicholas Witchell, and happy news for them, Nick.
Yes, particularly, of course, after the miscarriage that Meghan suffered last summer, after which she wrote about the almost unbearable grief of losing a child. And they certainly look very happy in a photograph, a black and white photograph, that they've released to accompany the news. There we are, barefoot amid the apple blossom, or Harry at least. And this happy news comes just 72 hours after they learnt that they'd won the privacy case against the Mail on Sunday. So, of course, a double celebration. The Queen, the Duke of Edinburgh, the Prince of Wales and the rest of the royal family are all said to be delighted, and they have sent the couple their good wishes. This will be the Queen's 10th or 11th great-grandchild. That depends on whether Zara Phillips's baby is born before the Sussex baby in the summer. One unusual thing about the Sussex baby, it will, I think, almost certainly be born in the United States. It will therefore almost certainly be a citizen of the United States, notwithstanding that it will be 8th in line, boy or girl, to the throne of the United Kingdom.
Nick, thank you. Nicholas Witchell there. Armoured vehicles have appeared on the streets of several major cities in Myanmar. The military is moving to consolidate power after its coup 2 weeks ago. Ambassadors from the US, the EU, Britain and other Western countries have issued a joint statement urging the army not to harm protesters. In Russia, Valentine's Day has seen more protests in support of the jailed opposition leader Alexei Navalny. Women took to the streets with flowers, and this evening supporters across the country lit torches and candles, some forming heart shapes in the snow of their courtyards. There was no repeat of the violence and arrests of previous demonstrations, as our Moscow correspondent Sarah Rainsford reports.
The cold was toe-numbing in Moscow today. But these women defied the frost and their fear to turn out for a Valentine's Day protest. They called it a chain of solidarity and love, and they carried flowers, not placards. But the hearts were black, in memory of all the Russian women detained and persecuted because of their politics.
I want to support all these women and all these prisoners, and some of my acquaintances being prisoners also. We hoped that today it wasn't to be so many arrests, because we're here for love, not for struggle.
The numbers here are not huge, but the message that these women are sending is a strong one about the right to political, peaceful protest and for an end to arrests of people just for expressing their views. Today's protest was inspired by Alexei Navalny's gesture to his wife in court. Yulia was there as the opposition politician was sentenced to almost 3 years behind bars. That ruling brought crowds onto the streets last month, chanting for Navalny's freedom. They were the biggest protests against President Putin for years. And the response was tough. Thousands detained and dozens facing serious criminal charges. The Kremlin calls the rallies illegal, fomented by the West, it says, to weaken Russia. So Navalny's team have switched tack. Across Russia tonight, his supporters formed heart shapes in the snow in their own backyards. A protest both peaceful and riot police proof. They then flooded social media with the images. Philippe and Ignat came out tonight too. They were both arrested last month at the first street rally for Navalny. Locked in the same police van, they then shared a cell for 10 days. Undeterred, they joined the flash mob in Philippe's yard.
We want to feel free. We want to say our opinions. We would like to change something, yeah.
But you don't feel free now?
No.
So the protests have moved off Russia's deep frozen streets for now. But it seems the protest mood hasn't faded here. Sarah Rainsford, BBC News, Moscow.
Time for all the sport now. Here's Karthi Gnanasegaram at the BBC Sports Centre. Karthi.
Hello, Rita. Thank you. Day 3 of the second test between England and India starts in a few hours' time. But England need to make a remarkable comeback to avoid defeat. They were bowled out for 134 in their first innings on a deteriorating pitch in Chennai. And India now have a lead of 249 as they head towards victory. Our correspondent, Jay Wilson, has been watching.
Sum up Sunday in Chennai? Well, that. England began 329 behind. Rory Burns, 0 for 1. But what happens if Joe Root fails? Like this. Out for 6. Axar Patel's first test wicket. Now the crowd seemed closer than ever. Pitch bare, ball spinning, fielders crowding, and Dan Lawrence falling. Problems. Serious problems. Ben Stokes bowled. Ravichandran Ashwin masterful in India. Captain Kohli conducted the fans. Listen. Real noise. While Rishabh Pant flew to get Ollie Pope. Well, Ben Foakes steered and survived an honourable 42 not out. But Ashwin's 5th wicket meant 134 all out. India batting again, Rohit Sharma style. The lead to 249, and for them, just a perfect day. Joe Wilson, BBC News.
This year's Rugby Union Six Nations has provided some thoroughly entertaining encounters, and today saw another, with France going top of the table after a narrow 15 points to 13 win over Ireland. Ben Croucher reports.
Some fresh faces to answer Ireland's increasingly anguished call. A Valentine's Day without Johnny Sexton and other experienced heads. The new guard will not have loved a first half in which tournament favourites France lived up to that tag. But you can't get too far ahead of yourself in international rugby. One step ahead of the opposition is often enough, though, as Ireland continue to play catch-up. From behind, spot him, that's Ronan Kelleher. The hooker's twinkle toes dancing down the touchline and over the try line. Hope. Ross Burns' right foot, kicking Ireland closer still. 2 points in it, the romantic fairy tale comeback. Not on France's watch, sealed with a kick. The day they started shoulder to shoulder, now the Six Nations already looks out of Ireland's reach. Ben Croucher, BBC News.
It's time to pop out of the room. If you don't want to know today's football results, as Match of the Day 2 and Sports Scene follow soon on BBC One. Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang scored his first Premier League hat-trick as Arsenal were 4-2 winners over Leeds. Aubameyang was praised by his manager, Mikel Arteta, who said he is key to their success. Manchester United have moved above Leicester City into second place after a 1-1 draw with West Bromwich Albion. Wolverhampton Wanderers beat Southampton 2-1 and Fulham had a 2-0 win over Everton. Celtic beat St Johnstone 2-1 in the Scottish Premiership. 2 goals in 2 minutes from Odsonne Edouard means second place Celtic are 18 points behind leaders Rangers with a game in hand. And there's more on the BBC Sport website, including Australian Open news with Rafael Nadal facing Italy's Fabio Fognini in the last 16 of the tournament in the next few hours. Rita.
Carthy, many thanks. Well, there's more throughout the evening on the BBC News channel. Now on BBC One, it's time for the news where you are. Bye-bye.